Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. My name is Alfonso Peluso and I'm a Studio Associate Professor in the College of Architecture at IIT, the home of the legendary Mies van der Rohe, and I'm adjunct faculty at Columbia College Chicago in the Interior Architecture program. Shout out to all my students. I hope you're doing well on this great late spring day, early summer. It's a nice mellow day, about 65 degrees today, so I hope you are all doing well. Today's video is going to look at Enscape Materials, and here's a little preview image of what we're going to end up with. And here's our outline. We're going to go over quite a bit of stuff here, so it's packed with a lot of information. Before we jump into it all, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, head on over to YouTube and search me up and click on the subscribe button and click on the bell to receive all the notifications. We have a lot of videos. If you're into digital design, there is something here definitely for you. Right now I'm focusing on Enscape and the real-time rendering engine, so look out for more real-time rendering engine videos like Lumion and Twinmotion and others. Also, follow me on Instagram at my first name, Alfonso_Peluso. See what I'm up to with my students. A nice selfie there with some of my Columbia College students and my IIT students. It just finished up a great year of teaching at both schools, so I look forward to seeing everybody next fall. All right, let's jump into it. All right, we're going to start with the file from Enscape Lighting. So I've made two videos already. I've made Enscape Basics and I've made Enscape Lighting. If you haven't checked those out, go ahead and check those out, and that'll get you up to speed on what we're doing with materials. All right, so here's our file. We have this interior view, and we're going to get into materials today. Let's look at our outline. Our outline first item is Enscape 3.5. So Enscape 3.5 just came out this week. A lot of really great improvements in that. So if you haven't looked at Enscape 3.5, go ahead and download and install that. The other thing that we're looking at is in Enscape, we want to pin the window to the top so that it doesn't keep falling back behind the Rhino window. So we can do that under Settings and Preferences. All right, let's take a look at that. Which settings is it? Is it this settings? Preferences? I don't see it in this one, so it must be in the other settings. So two locations for settings, one here and one in the actual Enscape window. So let's launch Enscape, and before we launch Enscape, let's turn off all of our wonderful trees and people riding bikes and all that. Let's get that turned off and let's launch Enscape. All right, so here's a quick preview of the image we're starting with. So under settings, here's the gear, and under preferences, we have pin Enscape window on top of host application. So you want to check that on. That's very helpful to keep this window out in front. All right, what else are we going to dive into? All right, Enscape material type. So you can make materials in Rhino and you can use them in Enscape and they will render out, but I prefer the Enscape material type over the Rhino material type. It's just a lot faster and it has a lot more flexibility, more settings that you can change, and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so we're going to start with a wood flooring. So we have a floor in this scene and we're going to look at making a wood floor material. And so we're going to go ahead and jump over to the web. And we're going to look at a couple places today to find textures. One place is ambientcg.com. This is a great site for free textures, and they are all set up to be PBR, physical based rendering materials. So let's go ahead and click on materials, and I'm going to click on wood, and here we have a nice wood flooring material. So there's several different options you have for download in terms of resolution. You have 1K, 2K, 4K, 8K. We're going to go with the 1K resolution. We don't need this resolution to be super high in our renderings. So we're going to choose 1K. We're going to download that. And I'm going to make a materials folder for that. It's always a good practice to make a materials folder to store all your materials in. Okay, so this is going to download a compressed zip folder, as you can see, and I'm going to have to extract that. So let's go ahead and show this in folder, and I'll go ahead and right click on it and choose extract all, and we'll go inside it. So we'll see that we have many different maps to use. We have color maps, we have displacement maps that we can use for displacement or bump. If you're using a rendering engine that has ambient occlusion, you can use ambient occlusion. Roughness, Enscape has a place for roughness. So we have a lot of different maps here. So this is a great website to download textures from. Alright, so let's head back over to Rhino. Alright, so we're going to work with this floor a little bit. So I'm just going to minimize the Enscape window. And I'm going to select the floor, and I'm going to type in isolate. And I'm going to look at this in a perspective view. So I'm going to set my lower right viewport. I'm going to zoom out on all these views to just see the object that I'm working with. And in this lower right viewport, I'm going to go ahead and set this to perspective view. So I'm going to go to set view perspective. And notice my C-plane is flipped up. It's in the right view position. So I'm going to change it to world top. So C-plane. W, enter, T, enter for world top. Alright, and let's take a look at this in rendered. Now it's pretty bright, we don't see a whole lot, but once we apply the floor material to it, we'll see that. So we're going to start with a Rhino material. So I'm going to click on the little circle, it has a floor material there. And that material type is set to Enscape. Okay, so that's already been set. So from the options in the Rhino window, you can set it to Enscape. And you want to do that, or else no materials will show up in Enscape if they're not set to Enscape. So I'm going to click on Enscape. Click OK. So that's something you need to do ahead of time. And then I'm going to open up the material editor. Let's see if we can get the material editor going and the Enscape window going all at the same time. Okay, so you see Enscape is updated. That floor material, I want to see, or that floor object, I want to see this perspective view in the Enscape window. Okay, so I can do that by changing one setting here. We have synchronize Enscape's camera position. Synchronize Enscape's camera position with changes made in Rhino's camera position. So the two will follow each other in terms of the camera position. So I want to turn that on. Okay, and you see that changed quickly there. The other thing I have on is I have enable, disable live updates in Enscape. So I have it enabled, live updates in Enscape. So whatever I do in Rhino will automatically update in Enscape. Okay, so here's our floor material, or our floor object. Let's bring up the material editor, and you see floors here. And we're going to go ahead and get our texture map that we downloaded. So right here, there's a little folder for texture. So a couple things as we go through. The naming conventions in Enscape's material editor are a little unique. They're a little different than Rhino's naming conventions, and we'll just walk through those as we get to them. The first thing we'll notice is there's something called albedo, And in Rhino and other rendering engines, we usually see the word color there. So color equals albedo. So for the color, our texture map, we're going to click on that and we're going to find our material. We're going to find it under our wood floor folder, and we're going to choose color there. Okay, so I'm going to close out of this and see if this updates in Enscape for us, and there you go, it updates automatically. So Enscape and Rhino, they do not know how big or small to make this material. So we have to tell it that through the mapping widget in Rhino. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this window, and in my perspective view, maximize that, I need to set the mapping widget up for this. So we do this by having the object selected. We go to properties. We click on this little ribbon, this texture mapping ribbon, this little folded surface, curved surface with the red and white checkerboard, red and gray checkerboard. We're going to click on that, and we're going to click on the plus for the box mapping. Now, 99% of your objects can use box mapping. So we're going to click on that, and I'm just going to draw a little box. It doesn't matter what size it is, any size in the Rhino window. And I have to choose capped equal yes from the command line. This is something I always forget to do. I always try to move to the next step, and I can't move to the next step without clicking capped yes. So I have to click capped yes. And you see now the texture is a certain size. And that size has to do with these numbers over here in the XYZ. Now, one thing I didn't mention, which is really great about the texture maps from ambientcg.com, is they're square. So with them being square, that's great, because then I can set all these values to the same number, X, Y, and Z, because it's square. We'll look at an example next where it's rectangular. Okay, so this one's square. Let's see how many wood planks we have. So let's look at this. Alright, so I'm looking at this object, and if I count the number of planks, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, I'm going to find that there's 24 planks. And I'm going to give them a little bit larger of a size per plank than usual. Just to, sometimes when you're working with materials, you have to exaggerate their size because you're working through the lens of the camera and the rendering engine, and you really want to show off these materials. So sometimes you have to make them a little larger than real world. So we're going to make these 4 inches per plank, and we have 24 planks at 4 inches, so it's 96 inches. So the area, the square footage of this material, the area is 96 inches wide by 96 inches tall. So that's the size of that texture map. So we have to tell Rhino the size of that texture map is 96 by 96. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to put in 96 here for all these values. And I'm going to lock that. And the reason I want to lock it is now if I say, well, that's a little bit too large, I want to make that smaller, I'm going to type in 72, enter, and all of them change to 72. And you see that updating live in the Rhino viewport, which is great. Alright, so I'm going to make it 96. And if I wanted to rotate the wood flooring, I would go over here to the XYZ location, and I would just rotate that. I would type in 90, enter, and I can rotate that. I can put in 45 and on a 45-degree angle. And I think we're going to keep ours at 0 because I want it running out parallel to the camera. I just like my wood flooring parallel to the camera. Okay. Let's look at this in our interior view that we've set up here. And let's see that through the lens of Enscape. Okay, so we see that's been updated nicely. Okay, let's show our objects. So I'm going to type in show. Okay, and you see how quick that updates in Enscape. So there's a little bit of reflectivity happening with this object. A little bit of glossiness, a little bit of reflectivity, not with the object, yes, with the object, but also really with the material. So let's go ahead and open up the material editor again. So I'm going to click on this black and white checkered sphere, and I'm going to go over to floor, and I'm going to look at some settings under reflections. So under reflections we have roughness, metallic, and specular. So roughness equals glossiness. Okay, so we have a little bit of glossiness. Actually, we have a lot of glossiness because the higher the value, the less reflection or the less glossy. So if I turn this all the way up, you see that that no longer has any glossiness or any reflectivity to it. And as I start to turn it down, if I turn it down all the way, it has more glossiness and more reflectivity. So I'm going to give that just a little bit there, a little bit less, I should say. Then we have metallic. If an object or material needs to be metal or metallic, we can use this metallic setting. And we will make a metal material a little later in the video. But for right now, metallic is just set to 0. Then we have specular, and specular equals reflectivity. So roughness equaled glossiness, and specular equals reflectivity. So if I dial this down and I turn my roughness all the way up, you see it goes away, it starts to be matte. So let's bring this back to where we had it, and let's increase the specular. Okay, so, and it has to do with different angles that we're looking at this object. So specular and is equal to reflective, but it also depends on the angle that we're looking at the object. Okay, so I'm going to keep mine relatively high there. Alright, and we'll look at some more of these as we move through the video today. Alright, so that's our wood flooring. What do we have next? Next we have a brick wall, so we're going to make a brick wall. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this Enscape window, and I'm going to select my 2 walls, and I'm going to isolate those. I'm going to look at those in my perspective view. Okay, so these are going to be my brick walls. So I need a brick material for them. So I'm going to go over to the web and look at another place to find some good texture maps. This one is called architectures.org. Architectures.org. It's a nice website for materials. The only thing I don't like about them is they're not square, and I have to put in values that are not square, and we'll see that in Rhino. But what I do like about it is they tell you the values. They tell you the area of their materials, the size of the materials, which is really great. So I'm going to head on over to brick, and I'm going to go down to more, and I'm going to find rusticated red brick stretcher. So I'm going to click on that one. And here you see that it has the width and the height. So it's giving me the values to enter in Rhino. I just have to figure out where to enter those in, the X, the Y, and the Z. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and download this JPEG. I'm going to download it to my materials folder. Okay, let's head on over to Rhino. Let's save this file. We don't want to lose anything. Okay, so let's go over to our layers in Rhino, and we'll notice that the wall already has a walls layer, and that's going to be set to Enscape. So that needs to be set to Enscape, so that will show up in the material editor. If a material is not labeled Enscape, it won't show up in the material editor. So let's go to the material editor. Let's open up our Enscape window. And let's go to walls. And let's go to the albedo texture, the color texture. And go into our materials folder, and we're going to choose rusticated red brick stretcher. And when I close this, that's going to update. Okay, so again, Rhino and Enscape, they do not know how big or small to make this material. So I'm going to minimize this. We're going to go ahead and look at placing the texture map box, the mapping widget. We're going to place our mapping widget, so we're going to go to Properties, and under our texture mapping ribbon, we're going to go to plus for the Apply Box Mapping, and I'm just going to draw a box any size, and click Yes to Capped. Okay, that's looking pretty good in the viewport already. Just want to make sure it's the correct sizes. So those sizes come from architecture. So we have the 66.1 and the 35.4. So I'm going to enter that into Rhino. So 66.1 and 35.4. That's the X and Y. That's really not doing much in my Rhino window. The real important value is the Z value. And if I make the Z value 66.1, I see that the bricks look a little tall. They look a little bit unproportional based on the image. They're not the same proportion as the image. So I know that that's the wrong value there. So I have to put in the other one, the 35.4. So that's the difference when a texture map is rectangular versus square. For square, you put in all the same values for all three. For rectangular, you just have to guess which one goes where. And you just figure that out by the proportion of the texture map. Okay, so that's looking good. Looks good in our Enscape window. Let's check that out in our interior view. Let's go ahead and show all of that. Okay. Let's get that to update in. Okay, so it's not updating for me in live real time, so I need to go to the binoculars, and I'm going to click on camera 1. Oh, interior. There we go. Alright, so now we're seeing our brick wall. That looks pretty good. Now it's got a lot of sheen to it. It's very glossy, and it has some reflections. It's not really what brick looks like unless it's a glazed brick. So we're going to change those settings in the material editor. So let's open up the material editor. Let's go to walls, and let's go down under reflections. So we have the roughness. Again, the roughness equals the glossiness, and it's the higher the value, the less glossy it's going to be. So we kick that all the way up, and I'm going to take my specular all the way down. Alright, so there's our brick texture. And we're going to leave the brick texture for now, but we're going to come back later on and look at applying a bump to this brick material. Alright, so let's see what's next. How are we doing? Brick wall. Alright, metal. Love making metal material. So let's make a metal material. We need a layer and an object for the metal material. We don't have an object yet. Alright, so let's go to our layers, and let's make a new material, or a new layer. I'm going to call this metal. Make it current. I'm going to draw a cylinder because flat objects with metal aren't so exciting, but curved objects with metal are really exciting. So we're going to make a cylinder, and I'm going to put the base of the cylinder right here and give it a size and give that a height. So there's our cylinder, and that should be displaying in the Enscape window as just a gray plaster material that comes from Rhino. We're going to go ahead and make that a metal material. So over here in the layers for Rhino, we're going to click on the little white circle that brings up the material editor. We're going to name this. I'm going to call this metal. We're going to change the type to Enscape. Okay, and it already has some metal qualities just based on the default material in Enscape. So we'll click OK, and we'll look at that in Enscape. Looks like I closed Enscape. So let's open that back up. No, it's still open, so let's find it. There you are, just hiding. So here's our metal material. So let's take a look at that in the material editor. So here we have our metal material. So let's go down to reflections. Okay, metallic has been turned all the way up. So if I lower that value, you see the metal material goes away. If I raise that value, the metal material comes back. We have the roughness, which equals the glossiness. So if I crank that up, it's less glossy. If I lower it down, it's more glossy. And you see it can get reflective as a mirror there. So let's do it somewhere in between. Let's go down a little bit. I think that looks pretty good right there for a metal material. I'm loving that. Alright, what's next? That's metal. Next we have an opacity map. Opacity maps also are a lot of fun. We can look at making a perforated metal object. Lots of uses for opacity map. Once you see it and see what we can do with it, you'll think of a lot of different uses other than just perforated metal. So let's go ahead and look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize my Enscape window. And I'm going to make a layer. I'm going to call this opacity map. Some rendering engines call it opacity maps, some call it transparency maps. So it's just a term. Opacity and transparency maps go hand in hand with one another. So make this current. I'm going to go ahead and draw a rectangle, or I'm going to draw a plane. I'm going to draw a plane. I'm going to make it vertical. And hard to see where I'm drawing it, but we'll move it into place and we'll make it a good size once we look at it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and use my gumball to stretch this out a little bit. Alright, where is this in plan? Let's check it out. It's all the way out here, so it's a pretty huge plane I've made, so we're going to make it a little bit smaller here with the gumball. Alright, let's take a look at that in our interior view. Let's go ahead and make it a little shorter. Alright, that's good enough. Alright, so that's going to be our plane for our opacity map. Let's head on over to ambientcg.com and let's go to materials. And I can type in the search. I can type in perforated metal. And I have a few options for perforated metal. I'm going to go with the second one. It's called Sheet Metal 02. I'm going to download the 1K version of it. Okay, that's going in my Enscape Materials folder. Take a look at that. I'm going to right click on it and extract all. Go into that folder. Okay, so here we see the color map, and that's a sheet metal color. Okay, that's going to show up on our opaque areas of the object. And just to explain that a little bit more, so if we look at this perforated metal, it has opaque areas and it has these circles which are transparent. This is not something that you would want to model in a modeling software because it would just take up so much of the computer's memory with these fine little details. So this is something you want to use a mapping technique, and we're going to use our opacity mapping technique for that. So that was our color. And then we have our opacity map. So the opacity map is black and white. The white areas will be opaque and the black areas will be transparent. And here you see this is a nice seamless texture coming out of ambientcg.com. Alright, let's get that into Rhino. So we have our opacity map. I'm going to click on the white circle here and I'm going to call this perforated metal, and I'm going to make the type Enscape. Already gets metallic, so that's the default Enscape material. It looks pretty metallic to begin with. And let's go to our material editor, and we'll go to metal. And for our color texture, our albedo, we're going to click on the folder, and we're going to go inside the sheet metal, and we're going to choose color. Alright, so if we see this, if we take a look at this in the Enscape window, let's go to our camera view. So we can see a little bit of that metal. Oh, I have that on the wrong material. We're seeing that on the metal material, not the perforated metal. So we're seeing that texture map show up there. So let's get that on the right correct object. So perforated metal, here's metal. I can just click on the X to get rid of that. It goes away in Enscape. And let's go to perforated metal and go to the albedo texture and put the color map on it. Okay, so there we have it. Now it still doesn't know what size to make it. It just kind of squished it on there, but we can look at that after we get the perforations in it. So the perforations are going to be under transparency. I mentioned some rendering engines call it opacity maps, some call it cutout maps, some call it transparency. This is transparency and cutout. I'm going to click on the folder for textures, and I'm going to choose the opacity map. And there you see that updating in real time in Enscape. So the size of it, the proportions of it are a little bit off. So we need to make that mapping widget in Rhino. And we can make it square because this was a square texture from Ambient CG. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over to the right here. And I'm going to go to Properties. Click on the plus for Apply Box Mapping. I'm going to draw my little box. Click Cap Yes. So we'll see that updating here. So it's really fine. It's really small. So let's make it square. Let's make it 48 by 48 by 48. And we'll lock it. Okay, so now we're seeing that texture. I want to make it a little bit larger, so now I can just increase these numbers because they're all locked and they're all square. I can try 60, I can try 72, and they all change and it updates in real time. Alright, that looks pretty good. By default, it looks pretty nice because it has the metal material on it already, meaning it has the settings for it to be metal. So we can take another look at that in the material editor. So we'll go to perforated metal, and we'll go down under roughness. So roughness equals glossiness. So it's pretty low on the glossiness. So it means it's a high glossiness value. It's pretty low on the roughness, which means it's a high glossy. And we have metallic, which is set really high. Once metallic is set to 100%, specular doesn't come into play. Alright, what is next for us? Let's close this material editor. Okay, metal, we looked at opacity map, grass, okay? So from the first video I made on Enscape basics for Rhino, I put some basic materials on. I put the wall materials and the floor materials with no textures, and I added a grass. So let's take a deep dive into that grass material. Okay, so we're going to isolate the grass. So I'm going to select that grass plane, that green plane, type in isolate, and here we have our grass. So I can zoom into this. I'm going to try to get nice and low. Oh, look at that grass moving in the wind there. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So I'm going to open up my material editor, and there is a grass material, and that's showing up as grass just because I've changed the type to grass. Okay, so the type is grass, and it has a couple settings here. It has a height and a height variation. Okay, so if I want it to look, let's see, can't do these at the same time, can I? Okay, so for height, I can lower down the height, and I can lower down the height variation. And let's get that to update. There we go. So you saw that update. It was very high before. So if I go higher, whoa, got some tall grass there. And if I go a little lower, so you see this updating. Let's look at this. Let's close this window and look at it a little bit from the top. Let's see this, if I can get a good view for us. Okay, let's go back to that grass material. So we have the height. So this will change the height of all the blades of grass. And you get some, it looks like you get some pockets in there. The height variation will make the height vary throughout the image, so you'll get a little bit more height variation. So you can see that happening in there. So as I lower this down, you see some blades are longer than others. Okay, so let's make it a little taller. So what's this look like through our camera? It's pretty far in the distance. Yeah, so we see that there. And if we turn on our objects, let's close this material editor. Let's type in show. And let's go to our interior view. So it's pretty far in the distance, but we see it has some length to it. So with a high quality rendering of that, we should be able to see that in detail. All right, so that's grass. Okay, what is next? Next is carpet. So grass and carpet, a little bit similar, but a little bit different. So let's look at carpet. So we're gonna go ahead and make an area rug underneath our Eames chair and our Eames ottoman there. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this new layer area rug, and I'm going to make it current, and I'm going to go ahead and draw a box this time because I want to give it a little bit of thickness. I'm going to give it a thickness of 1/4 inch. Okay, so let's get that to sit where it should sit. Whoa, that's big. Alright, so I'm going to put this area rug here, and I'm just going to use the gumball to scale it down a bit. See how that looks in our interior view. Okay, that looks pretty good. How does that look in Enscape? Alright, so there we see it here. Just the basic white plaster material from Rhino. So we're going to go ahead and make that into carpet. Alright, so let's just look at the carpet without the texture map on it. So we'll go to the material editor. First we need to set the material up here in Rhino. So we'll click on the white circle. We'll go down and change that to Enscape. We'll name it. We're going to call this carpet. And we'll open the material editor. And we'll look at carpet. Alright, so we're going to change this type to carpet. Let's see if we can see this happen in real time. I'm going to change this generic to carpet. And there you go. We got the 70s shag carpet going. As shaggy as you can get it right there. So let's look at that. We have the same thing as we have in we had in the grass material. We have the height and the height variation. So I'm going to take the height variation all the way down. I'm going to take the height down on this because I want to see the legs, those wonderful metal legs of the Eames furniture there. Okay, so a little bit lower still in height. So even at 0% it has some height. and our height variation is 0. Okay, so right now it's just white. I want to put a texture map on it. So I'm going to go over to ambientcg.com, and under materials I'm going to type in carpet, and we have some to choose from here. I'm going to go with this one, give it a little bit of color in the scene. And we'll download the 1K version of it. And we'll extract that. Oh, I want to extract it. So right click on it, choose extract all. Alright, we'll go inside it. Okay, so it has color. And I don't need a displacement map or a bump map or anything like that. I just need the color map. So we're going to go with that color. Alright, so let's add in our albedo texture map. Alright, there we get a little bit of color and we can see a little bit of that texture. Now, we haven't given this a size. We haven't put a mapping widget on it to tell it what size to make this fabric color. So here you see it there. We haven't sized that. You see it's quite large actually in the Rhino window. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's close this. Let's close this. Let's go to the perspective view. And there in Rhino we can see the size of that. Okay, so we have the area rug selected. With the area rug selected, we can go to properties and we can click on the plus for apply box mapping. This can be square, so after I click the cap yes, I can make these all the same values. So I'll start with 24, which is 2 feet. And I'll lock it. Okay, a little bit too small. So let's see, what does 48 look like? What does 96 look like? Alright, 96 looks pretty good there. Alright, loving these square, seamless material textures from Ambient CG. Just lock it and put in all 3 of those values. Let's see how we're doing over in Enscape. Okay, so let's go to our camera view. Alright, this is looking pretty good. Let's see what's next on our agenda. Okay, we had carpet. Now we're going to look at bump maps. Glass is coming up. I know everybody's looking on how to do good glass, so we're going to take a look at that. But first we're going to look at bump map. Alright, so we'll do this for our floor and our brick wall. Okay, so let's start with the floor. So we're going to go ahead and open up the material editor and go to the floor, and under height map you see it says bump map, and we can click on the folder and let's find our bump map for the wood floor. So we have our displacement map. So let's look at this. Let's open this up. So it's it's basically a black and white image, but it has gray tones. So it has white, gray, and black. The black are going to recede down the most. So they're not as black as I'd like them. They're a little bit more of a dark gray, but we have the lines between all of the planks. So those are a little darker than the color on the plank itself. So those will recede down further. And the gray, so the light gray, will recede down a little less, and the white won't recede down at all. So we have a displacement map. We can look at using that. We also have a roughness map. Oh, I didn't mean to put that on there. Let's take a look at that. We also have a roughness map. Okay, and I would have to use an invert of this. I would have to do this inverted if I wanted to use it. Because right now it's white and white stays flat. The joints are white. Okay, so let's use the displacement map. Okay, and you can see that right away we get some bump to that. And let's go down and take a look at the height map. So 3 is the default. So 10 is really, we're getting some real large bumps in there, and it's mainly where the light is happening, and that's the light coming from that self-illuminated object. And we're going to have to look at that self-illuminated object as well. So I don't think that make it to our, it didn't make it to our little outline here, so we're going to put that in. So after bump map, we're going to look at self-illumination, sometimes called emissive. Okay. Alright, so we're going to make sure we look at that. Okay, so back to this wood floor. Let's lower the bump on it. So if I didn't want the bump to be on the planks itself, I just need a different texture map. So let's experiment with one more thing. Let's go to the folder for bump, and let's look at this ambient occlusion. Now Enscape doesn't use ambient occlusion. It's a physics-based rendering engine, so it doesn't use ambient occlusion. But I can use this map because it's black and white. It has the white areas for the flat planks, and it has the black areas for the joints in between. So let's go ahead and try this one out. Okay, so you see it's more of a glossy floor, with just the joint lines are showing up as bump. And it really needs a light to make that happen, to really see that. Okay, so that's our bump map for our wood floor. Let's do the same thing for the wall now. Let's go to the walls. Let's go to bump map and click on the folder there. And we need to go to our brick material. Okay, so this is the rusticated red brick stretcher. So we don't have, from architectures, we don't have a bump map for this or a displacement map for this. So I could try making one in Photoshop, making this black and white, but let's go ahead and look at a different brick texture. We'll get one from Ambient CG. Alright, so we'll close this out. Actually, we could get it from Ambient CG, but I think now is a good time to look at the Enscape Material Editor. So import from Enscape Material Library. So we can look at that. Before we do it, let's just kind of go in order. Let's do our emissive material, self-illumination. Oh, it is there. Okay. Oh, wow. Those of you at home are probably like, what the heck? I just don't like the order of it. Let's take it out. Let's take it out of the bottom order. So let's take it out of here. It'll come before glass. Alright. So that was there. Okay. So let's look at that self-illumination. Alright, so we have modeled a little, let's get this to show up here. We modeled this little box and we filleted the edge to make the edges nice and soft. And you can see that in the material or the lighting, the Enscape lighting video. You can see how we did that because we wanted to look at that as part of lighting because it self-illuminates. It lights the scene. Okay, so let's go to the material editor and let's look at that. So we have emissive and we have self-illumination, and that's turned all the way up. So it's really simple. It's just changing the type to self-illuminated and you have this to work with, the luminance of it. Okay, and I turned it all the way up, and you can look at different colors for that. So that's there for you as well. That looks pretty good. Let's leave it like that. Alright, so that's self-illumination. So now I want to look at importing materials from the Enscape Material Library. And there are a lot of materials there. You might say, why even go to another website? But it's good to see these other websites with textures, but it's also good to see what Enscape has. So under Materials, I'm going to click on Import from Enscape Material Library. And we have all these materials, and they're just up in the web, they're up in the cloud on the internet, and if we want them, we have to download them. So let's go to bricks. Okay, so we have some bricks here. So not everything, so we would need these other websites to choose from as well. There's no new bricks, it says, huh? Alright, so let's go to bricks. Okay, and let's take a look at these. Let's look at brick 11. So I'm highlighting that, and then I can download that by clicking on Import Selection. So I'm going to click on Import Selection. Okay, so I'm waiting for a folder to pop up to tell me where to save this. So I'm going to click on the little settings here in the lower left, and I'm going to tell it where to save it. So I'm going to click on, I think I'm going to click on the little folder here, and yeah, the little folder, and we're going to go ahead and put that in my materials folder, and we'll go over this a little bit more once we get into it. So I'm going to put this under my Enscape Materials in my Materials folder. Okay, and I'm going to choose Select Folder. And then I'm going to click Save. Okay, so I wanted this Imported Texture Path window to pop up when I clicked on Import Selection. It didn't do that. Okay, I'm not sure why. Maybe people can leave me in the comments why that's happening. But I had to click on the little gear in the lower left, and then I clicked on the folder to tell it where I want to put these textures. And I'm going to click Save. And I'm going to go ahead and close this. Okay, so now if we look at our Materials folder, you'll see I'm looking for this subfolder and it's not showing up. So let's try it again. I'm in the right location for sure. Just got to get that folder to show up there. Okay, so we'll go to Import from Enscape Material Library, and we're going to go to bricks, click on Import Selection. There we go. Now at the bottom it says imported materials can now be applied or edited, and it shows up on the left here. It shows up in my materials window, so that worked. And hopefully that material texture textures are in my materials folder. Now let's take a closer look at this. So Enscape, in my opinion, has a little bit more work to do on this importing materials, because it gave me 3 separate folders for 3 different types of the brick. So it put the displacement in its own folder. Let's see, it put the brick color in its own folder. And let's see what else it has for us. They put the roughness in its own folder. Okay, so Enscape has a little ways to go. Those should all get dumped into one folder. It should be named something nice, not this strange name. It should be called Brick 11, and it should have all the colors in it. So hopefully they'll get to that. Alright, so here's our brick material. Here's our brick material. So we have to assign that to the brick wall. It's not yet on the brick wall. So we have to do that through Rhino. Okay, so let's go ahead and minimize our Enscape window. And let's look at our layers in Rhino. And we have our wall layer. Okay, so I can go to walls. And let's see if our brick 11 shows up here under our types of materials. There it is. So I go to walls. I went to the little white circle for walls. I go over here to my material editor. I click on walls. I'm going to change it to brick 11. And that should update in Enscape. Let's get that to update. Let's close out of this. There we go. So that updated. And that already has a bump on it. We can look at this in a little. It already has a bump applied to it. I don't like the size of it. Okay? The size of it is incorrect. So we'll change that. But let's look at that in the material editor. So brick 11, it has the color texture and it has the height map, the bump map. It's using the displacement map for that. So it's not using a black and white, it's using a normals map. And a normals map has more height variation because it has extra colors in there. It has extra pixel values. So you can use these displacement maps as well. Okay, what else does it have in there? It has the roughness under reflections. So it's using that roughness map for that. Instead of using the reflection setting, it's using the roughness map. So it's pretty well done. It just needs to they just need to all be saved in the same folder. All right, so let's get the size of these correct. So let's take a look at that color map, which was in the second one, I believe. Okay, so let's get the texture height. So for brick, a little bit about brick. Probably a little more than you want. But I have to figure out, I have to tell Rhino and Enscape, what size do I make this brick material? It doesn't know. So I'm going to count the amount of brick rows I have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. A nice round number. Whew! A lot of counting there. So 40. So 40 rows of brick. You can say each row of brick is about 2.6 inches tall. So 40 times 2.6 is 104. All right, so 104 inches tall. All right, I'm just making a note of that. All right. So we go over to Rhino, and I bet Rhino's value is smaller because I can see the brick is squished together in the rendering. So let's go over to Rhino and we'll select both of the walls. Selecting both of them because they have one texture map on one mapping widget. They have one mapping widget size for both walls. And I'm going to go over to properties and I'm going to go down and we're going to change this. These can be square. So this is going to be 104 square. Let's see this while we're typing it in. This is the big value here, the 104 for the Z. So 104. All right, now we have a brick that looks like it's the right size. That looks pretty good in there. Let's lock it. And we're seeing that brick on the right as it turns the corner. So we're seeing that right in the foreground there. All right. So let's take a look at our little our little outline. Okay, so we've looked at bump map, self-illumination. We looked at import from the material, Enscape Material Library. Okay, so, and we're getting to glass. Let's just move this around. A little behind the scenes here. Okay. All right. All right, let's look at glass. We got to make a glass object. So let's minimize this window, go to our layers, right click, new layer, call it glass, make it current. I think I could do it right here in this interior view. So I'm going to make a box. My object snap is on. It's set to endpoint. I'm going to type in box. I'm going to choose vertical. So I typed in box and I'm choosing vertical from the command line. And the start of my edge is the left side, the other edge is the right side, and then I'll go to the top of the wall and I'm going to make the thickness 1 inch. Alright, there's my glass. And I'm going to go ahead and make an Enscape material. I'm going to click on the little circle. I'm going to call this glass. I'm going to change its type to Enscape. Click OK. And let's see this in our Enscape window. So there we just have an object there. And we're going to go ahead and open up the material editor. Got really dark in there without the sunlight coming through. Okay, so we have our glass material. We're going to keep it as generic. The color, I'm going to make this a bluish green color. Okay, maybe not an aqua. Try a turquoise. And I can always change that. I'm going to start with that. Then we're going to go down to our transparency, and it's not going to be cut out. Okay, our transparency is not going to be cut out. It's going to be transmittance. And that gives me these settings here. I didn't have those when it was cut out. So it's a little bit sneaky there, Enscape. You're hiding that glass from us for some reason. Okay, so I'm putting it on transmittance, and you can see my turquoise color is turning the grass turquoise, and the blue sky a little bit turquoise. So for the refractive index, this makes it more reflective. The real refractive index for glass is 1.55. I can start there, or I can cheat and I can make it more. Opacity, if I bring this all the way down, the glass is completely transparent. If I bring it all the way up, it's completely opaque. Okay, let's get it somewhere in the middle there. Alright, so I want this to be reflective. Okay, and we mentioned that specular and roughness are really making our reflectivity settings. So I'm lowering this value of roughness, and I'm going to raise the value of specular. Okay, you see as I do both of those, I'm getting some reflections on the glass. Now I don't have any mullions or any window frames, so it's not maybe as to scale. It doesn't look as great as a glass material, but it's definitely working. I'm getting some reflectivity on that. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for glass. Alright, so let's go ahead and close this. It's been bugging me all during this video that these kind of enlarged light trims are not a metal material. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, kind of show you how to do that. So those are on my recessed can layer, I believe. Yeah. So those are on my recessed can layer. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the little circle, and I can just change this where it says default material. I can just change it to metal and click OK, and get a little bit of metal. It's a little bit bright up there, but a little bit nicer material on there. Alright, so a couple other things I think left on our outline. We have exposure value, visual settings main. So under our visual settings, under main, we have, right now it's set to auto exposure. So I can lower this and it gets darker. I can raise this and it gets brighter. So something about right there. So that's our exposure. Our exposure, that's always, in any rendering engine, you want to know where the exposure value is and how to set that. Okay, now we have output visual settings. Okay, so visual settings, we have output. Alright, so this is a real-time rendering engine. When I was working in non-real-time rendering engines like V-Ray, when I was working in V-Ray, I was just rendering out at high def. So full HD is 1920 by 1080. So I was rendering out at full HD 1920 by 1080, but this is a real-time rendering engine. So I can go higher. I could go to ultra 3840 by 2160. Or I can put in my own custom value, and I'm going to do 2500 by 1500. A little bit of a different aspect ratio than the high def, but just something I've used in the past, and I like that resolution. Okay, I'm going to close this, and there is a button here, the screenshot, Shift plus F11. I was struggling with this in the lighting video to get this to work on my keyboard, this F11, and I remember that I need a function on my keyboard. I need function Shift F11. So if you're working on a laptop, you need function Shift F11. Okay, it's asking where to save it. Let's go and save that under our videos, under Enscape Materials. Okay, one thing I want to check. I want to check something before I save this. I want to check what it's going to save as. So let's see, is this under visual settings, output? Right here it says export object ID, depth control, and alpha channel. So I'm going to make a whole nother video about that because that needs to be a whole nother video. So I'm going to uncheck that so it just makes the one PNG. I'm not applying the alpha channel because I'm not going to do any Photoshop work on this one. If I was going to do some Photoshop work, I would apply the alpha channel. Alright, so that's set there. Okay, so now I can do the function Shift F11, tell it where to save it. Alright, we'll save it right there. We'll call this Enscape Materials. And we're going to export that. Okay, it's going to take a few seconds to export it, which is just amazing. I'm just loving these real-time rendering engines. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. Oh, it's going to be in our videos, materials. Alright, there's our PNG. Okay, so it zoomed in for some reason, and oh, there it is. All right. Oh no, this isn't it. It zoomed in. So let's look at this in case this happens to you at home, like it just happened to me. Let's look at what the problem is or was. Okay, so let's minimize this. Now I do want to turn on my trees and people. So that's going to take a little while to turn on. Alright, let's open up Enscape and get that to load. So, alright, so what happened? So the Shift F11, which is a screenshot, function Shift F11, is a screenshot. So if I zoomed into the rendering, that's what it would output. So I must have zoomed in with my mouse button. I must have wheeled it in. So let's go ahead and try that again. Function Shift F11. Let's override the materials one. Okay, that's going to pop up and take a few seconds. Okay, it didn't zoom in, so that's good. So we know we're getting the correct image. Alright, so let's go on over here. Alright, there's our final image. That is looking really good. I'm really liking that. And that's a real-time rendering engine. Alright, I think we covered everything. If you like this video, go ahead and give me a like. If you have some comments, please leave me a comment. I love to get comments. All right, I want everyone to have a great day, and we'll see you on the next video. In the upper right, I'm going to put links to the other Enscape videos. Have a great one.